TK to YouTube. All right. All right, guys, we're back. Okay. We're back. Cranial nerve origins. Okay. So, besides knowing what the cranial nerves do, for a lab, you must know where they're located. Okay. In the brain and on the brainstem. I'm going to make it super, super easy to how to find these things. Okay. So, I walked through you guys with this. Okay. I walked through it with you. Showed you how to do this on the models and with the pictures, okay? I'm going to show you guys once again. Because it's really, really easy, all right? It's super easy how to do this, okay? There's a few tricks, all right? The first trick you always want to do, you always want to start from the top, okay? Always start from the top. You never start down by the brainstem. You always want to start from the top of the brain when you're looking at it, okay? So always start here. What you're going to be doing throughout the entire process of this is moving down, okay? Moving down the entire time. Okay, you're always moving in the downward direction. When you're doing that, you're going to be counting the cranial nerves while you do that. Okay, you're going to be counting all these little finger-like projections as you do that. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. Picture here, perfect brain, how it should look. Model here is how you guys should know it. Okay, so let's do that. So what's the rule? First thing, start at the top. Okay, we're going to count downwards like this. Okay, so the first two are always easy, okay, because they're the most distinguishable. This one here, little finger-like projection, and the one where they cross. All right, the first one, if you're going down in order, is CN1. Okay, that's olfactory. Okay, the one right below that with the chiasm. Okay, that is CN2, the optic nerve. Okay, right below that, arrow right below that. So keep going down. So 1, 2, 3. So that would be oculomotor down here, okay? And then you just keep working your way down. So what's right below that? That's number 4 down there, okay? So that would be CNIV down there, all right? That would be the fourth one. This one is also pretty distinguishable, okay? 3 branches, all right? 3 branches coming off this one. Really, really easy, okay? 3 branches, trigeminal, all right? CN5, trigeminal. All right, so stop there. Because what we keep doing, we keep going down, but I'm going to draw the little division line here, right across. Because now we're going to start from the top again, right where I drew the circle. Start from the top. So start with that guy, work your way down once again, okay? Let's zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. All right, so start with this guy. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, CNVI, abducens, okay? We're going to shrink it a little bit. It might get a little clustered here. What's right below that? 6, 7, CN, VII, facial, okay? What's right below that? CN, oh gosh, what's that? There we go. CN, VIII, number 8, okay? Vestibulocochlear. Keep going down, all right? CN, IX, number 9, glossopharyngeal, all right? What's after that? All right, number 10. I can get that guy in here, there we go. CNX, all right, number 10. Keep going down. Let's see if I can move him here. There we go. Perfect. All right. And this is where everyone always gets it mixed up. Because it's been 1, 2, 3. It's been the exact same way you count numbers all the way up until this point. When you get to 10, this is where things change, okay? And it's only for the last 2 cranial nerves. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 11. Okay? Forget the normal counting rules. Okay? It is not 10, 11, 12. For the cranial nerves, in order, it is 10, 12, 11. Okay? So, with the 12th one, okay, I showed you guys in class, the 12th one is that little itty-bitty prong. Okay, vagus is this huge fan-shaped one. Okay, the huge fan shape, I just drew it. Okay? That prong is that little guy right in the dead center there. Okay, right in the dead center. That's number 12. Okay, right in the dead center. Number 12 is right in the center, hypoglossal. All right, XII. And right below that is accessory. All right, CNXI. All right, so what did I say? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 11. Okay, and it's easy. The exact same way every single time. Always start from the top, work your way down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect division line. I'm going to start from the top again. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 11. All right. Super easy, guys. Super duper easy, okay? So if you're trying to find the cranial nerves on a model, for example, which we might see on our celebration, that's the key to doing it, okay? Super, super easy. I know you guys can do it. Very, very easy. Okay. Okay. With that, we're moving on to the spinal cord and the spinal nerve structures. Okay. So, along with the brain, the spinal cord is a part of the CNS. Okay. So we talked about the brain. We're going to talk about the spinal cord, the last part of the CNS. The nervous tissue of the CNS is very dense and highly organized so that areas of gray and white matter are easily visible. However, the arrangement of the tissue is reversed in the spinal cord, where the white matter is more superficial, the gray matter is deep. Okay? Like the brain, the spinal cord is surrounded by meninges for protection, so it has the dura, the arachnoid, the pia mater, all that stuff. The spinal cord has an additional layer of fat that fills the epidural space between the bone and the dura mater. The brain does not have a fatty layer, though. Okay, so it's only the spinal cord. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves that emerge from the spinal cord and are part of the PNS. Okay, so if it's any nerve, it's a part of the peripheral nervous system. Okay, and they innervate the structures in the trunk, in the arms, and the legs. The spinal nerves are named and numbered according to the vertebral level from which they emerge. Perfect. One pair of spinal nerves emerges from each vertebral level, except for the coccygeal region, which only has one pair. Okay, totally realistic. All spinal nerves are mixed, containing both sensory and motor fibers. But as they come back to enter the spinal cord, they actually separate out. So they are going to separate into sensory information that travels along the posterior, so the back side of the spinal cord, and the motor information travels along the anterior or the front side of the spinal cord. Okay? So that's how it works. Super, super easy. And then from there, the nerve branches into a dorsal and posterior ramus, and a ventral and an anterior ramus. Okay? So, diagram here. Okay? How are we going to draw this guy out? Let's do it together. Once again, okay, we drew this one in class. We're going to do this one together. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to label my reference frame. So this is going to be the posterior. This is going to be the anterior here. Okay. Draw my center here. I'm going to say SP, cord, little circle here. Okay. So coming out at the backside, okay, is going to be the dorsal root. Coming out of the front side is going to be the anterior root. Okay. Now, I'm going to specify which one is which. Okay. So I'm going to have my red be motor information. Okay. So if you see the red, it's motor. Okay. If you see blue, that is going to be sensory. All right. It's going to be the sensory information. If you see purple, for whatever reason, okay, this is going to be both. Means that it contains both sensory and motor information, which there is some in here. I'll show you where it is. Okay. All right. So starting here, coming out of the back, okay, is going to be the dorsal root. Okay. You can see these words up here. The dorsal root comes out the back. Dorsal root comes out like this. It's going to come over. The dorsal root has an accessory structure to it. It's called the dorsal root ganglion. Okay. It's sort of a bulb-looking structure. It extends out like that. Okay. So we're going to call this guy dors. See, I'm not doing this with a pen, by the way. I'm doing this with my mouse. That's why it's kind of janky. This is the dorsal root. Dorsal root ganglion. We're just going to call it DRG here, okay, for simplicity. DRG, dorsal root ganglion, which is essentially, it's just a collection of all the cell bodies that are interpreting the sensory information that the rest of the body is picking up and they're sending up to the brain. So that's what the DRG is. That's why it has that extra lump, okay? Now, red here, motor, coming out of the anterior side, it's going to come up here. Anterior does not have a ganglion of any sorts, okay? So it's going to come up and eventually meet up with the dorsal root, okay? When it does meet up with it, okay, when these two guys meet up, they're going to fuse, okay, in the one structure. When they fuse in the one structure, what they're going to be called is a spinal nerve, okay, as they meet up, all right? Let's also label some things here. This is the anterior root. And then once again in purple, when they meet up and they contain both. Oh, sorry. There's my eraser. Eraser. Right there. And when they contain both information, both spinal and motor, they are going to be called a spinal nerve. Okay. And the way that it works is that motor information is coming away from the spinal cord, so it's going out to the rest of the body, okay? So that stuff is moving in this direction here, like that. And then the sensory information is coming back to the spinal cord. So it's going to run like this. All the way back to the spinal cord. Okay. And we can see that when they're inside of the spinal nerve, you have a combination of both. So it's kind of like a 2-lane highway. Okay. You have one car going one direction, one going the other. Same thing for here. Motor information goes one way, sensory information goes the other way. Okay. Same thing. So these guys are going to branch off into these rami, the ramuses here, as the ramus, okay? Dorsal ramus is going to go towards the back, all right? It's going to innervate different structures of the back, muscles, bones, organs, etc. The anterior ramus is going to come into the front here. As such, innervate structures in the front side of the body, lungs, heart, etc., 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 okay? So we'll say D ramus, and then A ramus here, okay. Bad handwriting, because I'm writing with a mouse here, okay? It's hard, guys, it's hard. So, anywhere in purple, both, blue, sensory only, red, motor only. They all come back to the spinal cord, okay? That's all you got to know. I think it's a really good way of memorizing the spinal cord if you can draw it out like this. So I'd highly suggest doing this, because it's a really good way of memorizing what the structures are. But if you want to take it a step further, make sure you have that packet that I gave you guys, that little handout. It tells you guys what these things exactly do. Okay, so that's that. All right, moving down here, different structures of the spinal cord. Okay, so we talked about the dura, the arachnoid, and the pia mater. If you wanted to look in more depth at what these things are on here, you can see the meningeal layers. We zoom in. Okay, so we have the dura in the red. The arachnoid down here is like lighter blue. And then the pia is the sort of like apricot color one. It actually is touching the spinal cord itself, the pink kind of color you can see here, okay? And remember, we have the subarachnoid space. It's the dark blue here. That's where the cerebrospinal fluid is flowing through to nourish and bathe the spinal cord and give it nutrients. That extra landmark I was talking about was this yellow one here. It's fat, so it's called fat in the epidural space, essentially. Epidural means above or outside, so it's outside or above the dura mater, essentially, which is why it's called the epidural space. Okay. All right, so we have the spinal nerve branches. Remember, dorsal is carrying only the sensory information. The dorsal root ganglion is that extra little lump, that extra little bump there. It has the cell bodies for the sensory information as it goes back up to the brain. The ventral here is the anterior. Remember, this one doesn't have a ganglion. It's just a straight nervous structure here, okay? It doesn't have any fancy bumps. You can see as these guys combine into a spinal nerve, they're there respectively. You can see the matter here, so you can see the gray matter, how it's on the inside of the spinal cord now versus the white matter is on the outside, okay? So the gray matter is deep, the white matter is superficial in the spinal cord, okay? Interesting relationship they have there. The ramus here, so you have to look a little more big picture here to see the ramus here. So if you're looking a little more further back from the spinal cord, so you can see the spinal nerve here, and then you can see these extra branches that come off of the spinal nerve, and those are the rami, okay? So you can see a posterior ramus here as indicated, and you can see the anterior ramus here. Posterior goes to innervate the structures of the back of the body, that's why it's called posterior. Anterior innervates the structures in the front of the body, respectively, okay? Let's see what else here. A couple other landmarks here that wants you to know. Medullary cone and cauda equina, best seen here on this model here, okay? So the medullary cone, or the conus medullaris, okay, is the tapered end of the spinal cord, okay? It ends roughly around the level of L1 in most adults, which is a learning objective you guys should know. So the spinal cord basically looks like a big cylinder. As it gets closer towards L1, it starts to have a cone-shaped end. So if you think about a cone, it has a pointy end. That's what it looks like. Okay, that's what that medullary cone, or that conus medullaris is. And that's where it roughly ends. It's around T12, L1, L2 sometimes. So any of those answers are acceptable. Okay. And then the cauda equina, all right, you can't really see that one on models, but what it means in Latin is it actually means the horse's tail. Okay. And as you can see, as that spinal cord ends at that conus medullaris, what's happening is all the different nerves are basically forming down in the lumbar region and the sacral and the coccygeal region. They look a lot like a horse's tail here, okay? So that's what's going on. So It's a bundle of just nerves that come down after the conus medullaris, and it resides in the lumbar and the sacral region, and they spread out to innervate all the structures that are required of them, for example. So super easy. Okay, last thing to talk about here is the spinal nerves, as I had said. So another learning objective here, guys. So we have 31 pairs of spinal nerves, okay? We saw that in the previous paragraph, okay? A lot of people get confused on why the cervical region has 8 nerves, okay? And the reason being is because, Tyler, there's 7 vertebrae. Why is there an extra one? The reason being is because there is an extra joint, okay, in between C1, remember, atlas, and the skull, okay? So let's look at our nervous system here, okay? So remember atlas here? Atlas is what articulates with the skull, okay? So atlas is C1 here. And as I said, we have a spinal nerve that comes in this area, okay? It comes out of that atlanto-occipital joint, okay? So if I remove this dura mater here, we can see that spinal nerve as it exits right here, okay? So we have the roots here, the dorsal and the ventral root, spinal nerve right here, okay? C1, right? So atlas, C1, the skull is up here, okay? And as you go down, it follows the same pattern. So then C2, and then you have C3, you have C4, and so on and so forth. And you just keep counting, okay? You keep counting. When you get to C8, the last one, okay, which is C8 should be, where's C8? C7, or C8's right here. Okay, C8. Once you get to C8, this is between C7 and T1, okay? So C8's the last one. Then everything below T1, okay, thoracic vertebrae 1 is the first thoracic spinal nerve. And then it follows the exact same pattern. So it has 12 thoracic nerves. Then we have 5 lumbar nerves. We have 5 sacral nerves. And then we have 1 coccygeal nerve, okay? So you add all those numbers up. So 8 plus 12 is 20. And then 5 plus 5 is 10. So 20 plus 10, 30. And then that last one, 31, okay? So that's all it is with the spinal nerves there. And that's pretty much it here for lab, guys. So yeah, lab is pretty straightforward this time around, I felt like. This is definitely stuff that I think you guys are more than capable of nailing on your next upcoming celebration. So make sure that you spend a little bit of time over Thanksgiving break and maybe before break just to look at this stuff, watch my videos, just keep the cogs turning. It's a lot of time in between. It's 2 weeks from when you last looked at anatomy in lab until our next celebration. So I know some of you guys are, I've gotten some emails from some of you guys like, oh, Tyler, like, what can I do to, maintain my grade or keep my grade up? Well, this is the time to to really buckle down and get all those points. We only have a few select amount of points remaining in the class. So whatever you can do to make sure that you can maximize the points, so putting a little bit more time into anatomy, I think it would be worth your while. And I think you guys are going to be just fine with that. You guys have had great study strategies, I felt like, throughout the majority of the class. All right. So with that, once again, guys, we'll come down here and highlight. We definitely talked about the cranial nerves, numbers, compositions, all that stuff. We determined which ones are assessed by the clinical tests. We identified them on the images and the models. We looked at the structures on the spinal cord and the spinal nerves. We showed how the sensory and motor information travels through a spinal nerve and the roots. Remember, when they're in the nerve, they're kind of combined together. And then number 6 here, we talked about the level of the vertebral column that the spinal cord ends, which is roughly like T12, L1, L2 at the conus medullaris. And then lastly, we talked about all the spinal nerve pairs in the cervical through the coccygeal regions. Okay. So with that, you guys are all set. Have a good Thanksgiving. I'll see you guys afterwards. And then besides that, TK is out. See you guys later.